Number 10, Civil War II. I mean, why did this fight even happen again? Because Carol believed in future vision? But Tony, well, he doesn't like future vision. What is happening? What is this story? Whereas with the first Civil War, where the feud was all about whether or not superheroes should be registered government officials, which had two clear sides that each had their own merits, here we're arguing about something that no one really cares about. Well, except for Carol and Tony, that is, I guess. Captain Marvel believed in the Inhuman Ulysses' visions, and believed that they could actually be used, like in Minority Report, to prevent crime and destruction from happening before it took place. However, Iron Man argued that trusting these visions was dangerous, as it was possible that they were not guaranteed to happen. Overall, a lot of people got hurt, some even died, but we never really resolved the issue. The main takeaway was that Iron Man had been experimenting on himself and was now kind of part tech, and that Carol became a huge jerk. Thanks, Civil War II. Number 9, Clone Saga. There are a lot of things that I love about the Clone Saga, like all of the fantastic spider clones, but there are also some things that really bother me about it. Like the fact that readers potentially believed they were reading a Spider-Man Peter Parker story, only to later find out, dun dun dun, that it was actually a clone. What? I mean, you might have been one of the few people being like, no, I don't believe any of this. That's actually Peter Parker. This other Ben Reilly character, he's the clone, but yeah. The whole bait and switch here is the thing that just really gets me. That and the fact that there were so many insane tie-ins which make the Clone Saga confusing to read and follow up with, even in retrospect throughout issues. Never mind if you happen to be collecting the issues across all the series at the time of that event. Even the modern day recollections of Clone Saga are a mess. Number 8, Spider-Man's domestic dispute. So, this wasn't so much a dispute, I guess, as an accident, but it still seems weird to me that other characters have their lives completely destroyed because of something like this, and yet for Spider-Man, we never really held him accountable or really talked about it. It's like a weird double standard because I guess of how popular Peter Parker is. During the Clone Saga, there was a moment where Spider-Man accidentally hit Mary Jane without knowing that she was kind of like right by him. Except that Peter is insanely strong, sent her flying, and well, she was also pregnant at the time. I know Peter felt awful about this, but it's a little strange that not many other fans seem to echo Spider-Man's own disappointment in himself there, especially considering that Hank Pym once hit Janet and as a result was basically condemned and ostracized by the superhero community. And, you know, I'm sure that Hank also didn't feel good about hitting Janet after either. So it's weird that we're all like, that was bad, but this is like, so strange.
Number 7, Capitol Hill. A lot of people give Iron Man 2 a hard time, and while sure it's not the best superhero sequel, it had its moments, it had fun moments. A great moment when it comes to character development for Tony was when he was called to testify before the United States Senate Armed Services Committee. So Senator Stern demanded that Stark handed over his armor tech for military use. Tony then responds in a powerful way. He says that his suit and him are the same concept, and to give it over would be to turn himself over, which is not gonna happen. He is Iron Man. Plus, this is the same scene where we're introduced to Don Cheadle as the new Rhodey. It's a pretty big Marvel moment that takes place on Capitol Hill, except Capital is spelt incorrectly. I mean, hey, the YouTubers were probably too excited to upload the footage, and spelling mistakes happen all the time, even in a $200 million movie. Mistakes still happen.
Number 6, no consequences for Iron Man. There was a time in the comics when Iron Man was a very bad dude. I mean, there's been a few times actually when he's been a really bad dude, but what I'm talking about here is following the events of Axis. When after being accidentally turned evil, Tony Stark worked hard to make sure his alignment was not reversed. He managed to stay as one of the few permanently flipped characters and did a lot of very bad things afterwards as a result, but tried to initially play it off like he was actually the good Tony. But he wasn't. In the end, Tony would be forced to wipe his mind to protect secrets from Norman Osborn, who was put in charge after S.H.I.E.L.D. had disbanded. Tony would be able to recover from this catatonic state through recovering an older backup of his mind, one that fortunately didn't come with, you know, any of the knowledge of his evil deeds, because it was like from before, which meant no consequences for Tony, no guilty conscience, and even readers couldn't blame him for his actions back then because technically this was, in essence, good old Tony again. This wasn't like evil Tony. There was none of that in his mind. Not fair. Just because we love Iron Man in the MCU doesn't mean that Tony gets off the hook.
Number 5, the leader. Another huge villain teased in the MCU, but you may have forgotten about this one. Samuel Stearns, played by Tim Blake Nelson, was teased to become the villain at the end of that Incredible Hulk film. He got his hands on some of Bruce Gamma radiated blood, and when it was injected, his head started to become bigger. So what was this all about? Where was this going? Why was his head growing and looking weird? So Sam made his first debut in Tales to Astonish issue 62. He was working one night at a chemical research plant, and when he was moving canisters of waste material, one of the containers broke open and covered him in gamma radiation. He went from being smart to becoming a super genius. His brain could absorb more and more information. It got to a point where his physical body, of course, started to mutate. So now he has this giant green brain head. And he started to refer to himself as the leader, using his intellect to become a criminal mastermind. He clashed with Banner numerous times in comics. In fact, he actually ruined Betty and Bruce's wedding at one point. The Red Leader also joined the Thunderbolts in Volume 2, Issue 6. So maybe he'll return when those guys finally come together on the big screen. I mean, it looks like it's happening right now with Zemo and Ross at the end of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So maybe he's coming back. But as of right now, who knows?
Number 4, Peter and MJ's marriage. So many retcons, so little time. A big plot point and retcon that I'm still waiting to be undone is the abolishment of Spider-Man and Mary Jane's marriage. I mean, I personally don't know if the two would actually still be together today if their marriage had never been undone. It was always kind of rocky, and there were a lot of times that it felt like both partners could not meet the other's needs, which tended to cause, well, a lot of colossal problems there. But MJ and Peter do really see each other, I think, and often because of this, because they both understand one another so well, they would more often than not manage to work through their problems together and make it out on the other side. But we never got a chance to see how the marriage played out because in One More Day, their marriage was taken hostage by Mephisto. This is also just such a weird story. You know how I know? From trying to explain it to friends who don't read comics. That is a great way to test out how weird a story is. If you explain it to someone who doesn't read comics and they just can't process it, there's something wrong with that story. That's what I like to think. Like the Source Wall in DC. Try explaining that to people. I'm not knocking it, I'm just saying it's very out there.
Number 3, Cap's shield. Peter Parker is quite brilliant, so when he calls out Cap's shield and says that it doesn't obey the laws of physics at all, the kid's probably onto something. In the first Captain America, Peggy describes the properties of the vibranium shield. It's completely vibration absorbent. This is proven when Peggy then shoots at the shield numerous times and the bullets just fall to the ground, while the shield remains intact. Lovely, what a lovely piece of weaponry. And then in Captain America, the Winter Soldier, the shield reflects the bullets back at the enemies. Both great scenes, but confusing logic for the shield. But perhaps one of the most confusing moments is in Avengers Endgame, where Thanos has just ripped Cap's shield to pieces with his sword. It was a big, oh my god moment because we were told up until this point that the shield was basically unbreakable. This made us really look at Thanos and get afraid. We're like, oh, he just ripped apart his shield. Cap's for sure gonna die, he's done. But then once the Avengers reunite in a quick overhead shot, we can see Cap's shield in the background, and it looks to be in much better shape than moments earlier. This act was probably a nightmare to film and edit, so we're gonna forgive them when it comes to this shot. But Strange still having the Eye of Agamotto, that one we could talk about a little bit.
Number 2, Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver are not mutants. One of the worst things that has ever happened to the 616 universe, in my humble opinion, is the retcon of Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. No, I'm still not over it. I'm never gonna be over it. It needs to be fixed. Honestly, I enjoy silly retcons from time to time. The idea of retconning something as a plot device when needed, and especially when actually deployed to clean stuff up, does not bother me. However, this is something you need to be careful with, as retconning something like this, it can have repercussions that could extend beyond that one singular change. In the case of Wanda and Pietro, it made so much of their family history feel empty and meaningless now in retrospect. There are stories that you'd go back to, like Vision and Wanda's miniseries together when Magneto shows up to pay the newlyweds a visit, that completely loses emotional weight. House of M is another storyline that gets emotionally derailed by this retcon. And then of course, there are the plot holes that this retcon created, like Wanda working with Hope Summers to get rid of the Phoenix Force. With this retcon in play, being that Hope is typically known for taking on other mutant-based powers and abilities, her boosting Wanda's power, it doesn't really make sense if Wanda isn't a mutant. So, what? Number 1, 616 Gwen Stacy. To be clear, I don't actually have a problem with Gwen Stacy. I actually like her character and many other still alive versions of her from alternate realities. I'm typically a huge fan of those. What I don't like is how she was treated after her death. I'm not as conflicted as some Spider-Man fans about Gwen's death to begin with. I'm not like against her dying, but I'm not for her dying. But after she died, goodness, we should have just let the poor girl rest. Not only has she been brought back via clones too many times, and it also never ends well, but we've also felt it necessary to give her a darker, more horrible past, because that's what she needed, with her becoming the very young mother to Norman Osborn's twins. Just why? Why? Just let Gwen Stacy rest in peace, I say. Let her rest in peace.
Number 10, Thor's eye. Taika Waititi arguably saved Thor. He gave the character a complete makeover. He made an extremely fun sequel and the stakes were still extremely high. There are some major MCU moments in this film. Hela breaking Thor's hammer with her hand, Thor getting a haircut, Asgard is now gone, Odin also gone. It's a lot. Now near the end of the film, Hela takes Thor's eye out as well. It's a huge moment for him because while he's getting his ass handed to him by his evil sister, he has these visions with his father Odin and they bond in these visions. Thor explodes, he saves the day with a handle on his new lightning ability, and the last shot of the movie is Thor sitting on the throne with his eye patch. And he looks just like Odin. It's a beautiful look. And then come Infinity War, he slaps in a new eye and the iconic eye patch was just gone that fast. Now, in the Art of Avengers Endgame book, there's concept art of Thor still with the eye patch. So they were close, but maybe it was better for Thor's redemption to be entirely his own come Endgame. I like the eye patch, honestly. It gives me like Kurt Russell, Captain Ron vibes. And before we continue on with this list, guys, if you want to go ahead and give us a thumbs up on this video, those likes add up and it really does help us working from home and in studio. You guys are the best. Thank you so much. Now let's get right back to this list of weird MCU moments. Number 9, Edward Norton. Now, of course, we have to mention recast, especially when it's this big. Whenever people talk about rewatching the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you know, to refresh yourself before the next movie or the next show, there's always the question, do we skip the Hulk? I mean, chronologically, it fits in right after Iron Man 1, and William Hurt plays the same character. He plays General Ross, and he's still playing General Ross in the current MCU. But now the Hulk is completely different. Marvel decided not to bring back Edward Norton, not because of money, like some other people that I'm not even gonna mention on this list, but because they needed an actor who embodies the creativity and collaborative spirit of the other talented cast members. So Edward Norton's team did respond, saying it was indeed about money, but this isn't the first time Edward Norton's been on the naughty list. Number 8, Spider-Man Homecoming. One of my favorite Spider-Man movies of all time is Spider-Man Homecoming. It's pretty close to Spider-Man 2, Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man 2. They're both so different, but they're both so good. Now, when Spider-Man Homecoming takes place, well, that's a bit confusing. See, there's a flashback to the events of 2012's Avengers at the beginning of Spider-Man Homecoming, and then it says 8 years later, and boom, the movie starts. So that means Homecoming takes place in 2020. Although the film also tells us that Homecoming takes place a few months after Civil War, which happened in 2016. So in an interview with Infinity War co-director Joe Russo, when asked about the time gap between Avengers and Homecoming, he said it was 8 years, I believe. A very incorrect 8 years. And I thought the timelines in Endgame were confusing. God, my brain already hurts.
Number 7, Inhumans in general. I don't dislike the Inhumans, but what I'm not a fan of is how much Marvel tried to make them the new mutants, all because they no longer own the rights to the super successful X-Men. Marvel attempted to elevate Inhumans to new heights, hoping they'd become popular enough to rival their mutant crew, who was making a ton of other people money over at Fox. When this plan didn't end up working out, the Inhumans instead were just tossed aside, and many of them would end up being killed off. The Inhumans are great, but trying to make them into something they're not, then discarding them when it didn't pan out was pretty not cool. The Inhumans deserve to be loved for who they are. They're basically like Marvel's superhero version of the British Royals, and I love them for that. Let's not try to make them mutants. It's not what they are.
Number 6, Black Widow and Bruce Banner's relationship. Remember in Age of Ultron when Black Widow was the key to calming down Bruce Banner? They were in love, right? I think. I mean, they were flirting at the beginning, and then even Steve Rogers was like, hey, you're not breaking any bylaws. Have at it. And then at Clint's secret family farmhouse, they're talking about running away together. And then after all this time in Age of Ultron, Bruce returns to Earth. He says hi to Nat in Infinity War, and then she says hi back. And that's kind of it. Well, according to the Infinity War co-screenwriter Stephen McFeely, he said they certainly wanted to do more. There was a clear romance that was left behind. In an interview with IndieWire, the director said, we have scenes, we wrote them, we shot them, of them sort of hashing it out. You've been gone, I've moved on, that kind of stuff, blah, blah, blah. It became very clear that if a scene was not on the A plot, it would not survive Infinity War. That thing has to be on rails just to get to the finish line. I mean, sure, that's fair, that's totally fair, but I feel like if it wasn't going anywhere to begin with, it didn't have to be there. Besides, we have Betty Ross in the MCU as well. She still exists. The pesky Incredible Hulk plot coming back to haunt us years later. Number 5, Doctor Strange. One of the best parts of the MCU is how much they like to tease their upcoming stuff. It gets you excited. I mean, the after credit scenes are so common now that if you leave during the credits on opening night, you're just gonna have like 200 people yelling at you through their Iron Man masks. They're gonna be hucking popcorn at you. You're gonna be the laughing stock. Now, some of these nods can be a little confusing though, considering the timeline when you look at it in the grand scheme of things. Like in Captain America: The Winter Soldier, again, Jasper Sitwell explains Project Insight and how it keeps an eye on these powerful individuals, like these threats. He mentions Bruce Banner, the Hulk, and Stephen Strange. It's a cool moment that tells us that Doctor Strange is indeed in the MCU. It's fun. I remember the theaters, there was a little buzz going around as soon as he said it. It's cool. But right before Strange even gets into that car accident that makes him become the powerful Doctor Strange, he gets a call about Rhodey when he fell during the airport battle in Civil War. Now, it's not confirmed, but it sure does sound a lot like Rhodey and his conditions. Listing Strange was a cool shout out, but I don't think Zola's algorithm knew enough about him to be considered a threat. Yet. Number 4, Cap's love life. Since the first Captain America film, Steve has been head over heels for Peggy Carter. They talk about finding a dance partner, the pacing is done really well, there's a genuine romance building between the two. So when Steve puts the plane down in the water later on in that film and sacrifices his life, the last thing he thinks about is Peggy. It's super nice, it's thoughtful. And then comes Civil War, we have Steve just making out with her niece, Sharon Carter, in the airport. It didn't come out of nowhere. I mean, she was in the Winter Soldier sequel, but still, it's a bit weird for me. But what makes this PDA in the airport more forgettable is the fact that Sharon is basically a villain now, as of the end of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. We see in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, after the snap, she was just abandoned. She was part of a deal that if she helped take down the Flag Smashers, then her dark days as a crime boss would just be pardoned during that dark snapping time. Then a post-credit scene in Falcon and the Winter Soldier shows us this pardon, and then immediately she makes a call trying to line up buyers for secret government tech. Cap sure knows how to pick them. Damn.
Number 3, mistreatment of Miss Marvel. It's so bad. Anytime I go back to Miss Marvel's random pregnancy, it just makes me like grimace. And I don't know what's actually worse here. What happened to Carol or her so-called friends, the Avengers' reaction to the red flags surrounding it and her own emotional pleas for assistance. Wanda, aka the Scarlet Witch, at least tried to be there for Carol, but she also seemed to kind of be putting her own perspectives on child rearing on her friend. While Carol was decidedly disturbed to learn she had become pregnant without knowing how that happened or having a recollection of really sleeping with anyone, Wanda encourages Carol to be grateful because she herself cannot have children with her synthezoid husband Vision, which is just like not your choice for everyone, okay? Okay, Wanda, I get that that's your choice and I respect it, girl, but like, you cannot put that on Carol. Do not be like, oh, how nice for you. I can't have kids, so you should just be happy, Carol. No, this is weird. It's a weird thing. You should not be happy. You should be weirded out. I can't get too much into detail on this story, to be honest, because of the rules of the YouTubes. But what I can say is that it involves Carol having a rapidly progressing mystery pregnancy and then giving birth to the person that also impregnated her, feeling compelled to leave her life behind to go with that person, but not really remembering why she has strong feelings for him. So yeah. Fortunately, Chris Claremont would try to atone for all the horrors that Carol suffered here in Avengers Annual issue number 10. But if you want to go back to reminisce on just how awful this plot and this story was, you can check it out starting at Avengers issue 197. But you've been warned. You've been warned.
Number 2, the gauntlets. In Infinity War, Eitri is forced to make the gauntlet for Thanos on Nidavellir, the same place that Thor gets Stormbreaker and makes it just in time to join the battle in Wakanda, which would be on a list of best MCU moments for sure. But we did see an Infinity Gauntlet before this movie, a couple times actually. In the first Thor film, it was seen in Odin's vault. Now, come Thor Ragnarok, they fixed this with a simple shot. Hela walked by and said, fake, as she tipped it over. Cool. All the fans were like, okay, we understand that one, we're cool, we're on board. But a post-credit scene in Avengers Age of Ultron really got fans excited, and for no reason at all, it seems. The after credit scene shows Thanos putting on a gauntlet saying he'll do it himself. Now, it's actually a really crazy after credit scene. I remember the theater went kind of nuts. Infinity War screenwriters insisted that this is just a practice gauntlet, which is fair. I mean, you need practice to get that weight down. Because how embarrassing would it be if he goes to snap and it was like, damn it. Sorry, it's a new gauntlet. I've had like 2. And finally, number 1, the Bifrost Bridge. The climax of the first Thor movie was Thor making the ultimate decision to destroy the Bifrost Bridge. It's a huge moment. This means he won't see the love of his life again, and he saved Jotunheim from Loki, which is great. That's the main goal here. Now, when Thor returns on Earth in the Avengers, it's explained that this happens because Odin used dark energy. And at the end of Avengers, they used the Space Stone in order to go back. So far, this is making sense. But in Thor the Dark World, that bridge is just fixed. It's back to normal, and we didn't really get an explanation. Or did we? In a tie-in comic, Thor the Dark World Prelude, written by Craig Kyle and Christopher Yost, it shows just exactly how they fixed it. This comic showed Thor using the Tesseract to let the fires of Bifrost burn once more. And voila, Thor the Dark World now makes sense again. Although we didn't see it on screen, we do have a slight explanation, so we'll take it. Number 10, Gamora's origins. Gamora is a character whose past is a little confusing in the MCU, and now with her sort of back with the Guardians of the Galaxy post-Endgame, I'm pretty sure it's about to get a little more weird. In the first Guardians movie, Gamora explains her childhood. It's brutal. She says that when Thanos took over her homeworld, he actually killed her parents in front of her, and then he tortured her and then turned her into a weapon. Even John C. Reilly, the Nova Corpsman, was like, yeah, Gamora is the last of her species. But come Infinity War, the flashback is much different than we thought. We see her childhood and we see her get taken by Thanos, but half the population survived, because by the time we get to Infinity War, that's his clear motive, wiping out half the planet's life. Now the children born then have known nothing but full bellies and clear skies. Apparently, it's a paradise. So her origins are still a little confusing. Does she have anyone left? So are they alive and hanging out by the beach sipping cocktails, or is she really the only last of them? Who knows? Number 9, Tony and Pepper split. One of my favorite MCU films is Civil War. It felt dark. The Avengers were facing all these consequences after hucking cars around. It was a huge arc for Steve and Tony, especially right off the bat when Tony's giving a speech to some students, and then all of a sudden the Pepper Potts line comes up and Tony freezes. He wraps up the speech and he walks off stage, almost shell-shocked. So at this point, it's official. Tony and Pepper are no longer together. Tony walks off stage all distracted because he carried some weight from Ultron into this movie. He made it felt very real. He didn't stop making suits because he didn't want to stop. Pepper's like, well, you chose, peace. And then Spider-Man Homecoming comes rolling around and Pepper Potts comes from out of nowhere, all lovey-dovey, and they're back together. They're waiting for Spider-Man to announce his new Avenger status. It's like a big moment. It's almost like they haven't even been split up. In fact, it seems that they're better than ever because Tony pulls out a ring and just casually proposes to Pepper. What if Spider-Man did decide that he wanted to come out as an Avenger that day? When would Tony have proposed instead? Can we see that scene? Sounds pretty lovely. And before we continue on with this list, guys, if you want to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, that would be awesome. It really does help us out a lot, especially while we're working from home. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for your support. Now let's get right back into this MCU list. Number 8, 2 Ant-Mans. The final act of Avengers Endgame is an absolute roller coaster of emotions. Once Hulk snaps the world back, all of our heroes reunite, Cap says Avengers assemble, and it's just a great time after that. Right off the bat, we get a super long one take bouncing from one character to another, an Avengers tradition at this point. And while these fight scenes are quite the spectacle, it's sometimes hard to keep track of where everybody is. And this goes for the people making the movies as well, it seems. Especially Ant-Man. Even when he's giant, he's still hard to track down. At the 2-hour and 23 mark, Black Panther is running with the gauntlet through the battlefield, and in the background, we see Giant Man pushing a Chitauri Leviathan back through a portal. Pretty awesome. Only a minute earlier though, we just saw Scott Lang in normal size hotwiring the quantum tunnel van, a process that would have taken him 10 minutes to do so, says Scott. There's been a theory that maybe it was Lewis and he came back and then took a suit and then got giant and helped out, but I think that's just fans trying to cover up Marvel's blunder here. It's a massive scene. I mean, I didn't notice it the first few times I watched it, so hey, keep it up, you're fooling us. Number 7, The Mandarin. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings is directed by Destin Daniel Cretton and screenplay written by David Callahan. It stars Simu Liu, who you recognize from CBC's Kim Convenience, as Marvel's first Asian superhero. Now, everything in that first trailer looks amazing. The fight choreography, so good. And the villain is set to be the Mandarin. the actual Mandarin this time around. The Mandarin made his first appearance in Tales of Suspense issue 50. He wields 10 magical rings, each controlling a unique force. Now, the 10 rings aren't just physical items as well. No, it's the name of the evil organization that was working alongside Obadiah Stane back in Iron Man 1. They were the ones who actually held Stark captive in that cave. You could actually see their logo in the background, and you briefly see it again in Ant-Man as well, in the form of a neck tattoo. So they're still in the MCU, it's still a thing. So while we're super excited about the real Mandarin villain coming to life, we sadly have to reflect on the waste that was Ben Kingsley in Iron Man 3, when he played the Mandarin, well, the fake Mandarin. Marvel and their fake characters, oh boy. He was in fact not the supervillain Mandarin, rather his name was Trevor, and he liked crushing beers and watching sports. Number 6, Nick Fury's eye. Nick Fury has been there from the beginning of the MCU. Since that first Iron Man after credit scene, fans have been happy to see him reappear, even if it's just for a quick chat at a donut shop. His look is memorable too. I mean, for one, he's Samuel L. Jackson, so you're not really gonna forget him. And two, it's the eye patch, it's his character, he's so unique. Seeing him without one in Captain Marvel was almost weird. Fortunately, we got to see the origin to the eye patch, which was being teased since Captain America and the Winter Soldier. In that film, he said, "Last time I trusted somebody, I lost an eye." So, come Captain Marvel, it's time for some answers, here we go. His eye then was scratched out from Goose, our furry alien friend. Yeah, it left a scratch that eventually blinded him, yet in Captain America the Winter Soldier, there's a photo showing a Fury being sworn in as S.H.I.E.L.D. director, with both eyes looking quite normal.
Number 5, Hank Pym's mental illness. All because there was no time for re-edits, Hank Pym would end up becoming known as a mentally unstable man who hurt his wife, Janet Van Dyne. But although I agree with the Avengers that Hank was no longer a good fit for the team at that time, what I disagree with was the implication that came along with this whole instance. Hank Pym, even before this incident, has been known as a man who is not mentally stable. He had multiple personalities and had actually sort of kidnapped Janet while proposing to her. When his first wife was killed, he had a mental breakdown. Years later, Hank Pym would actually diagnose himself with bipolar disorder. But the most upsetting thing with Hank Pym isn't that he's mentally ill, or really that he hurt Janet, although obviously that's not good. And I'm not condoning that. It's how his mental illness turned him from hero to villain. It's the way his mental illness was presented and was handled in the comics. Instead of trying to help Hank, he was shunned for his actions. It feels as though Marvel at the time was kind of saying, Hank is crazy, which makes him hurt people, which means he's a bad person. In other words, craziness or mental illness equals bad. And that is the thing that I don't like when we do in comics, and I feel like mental illness, it's hard to handle in comics because sometimes that's just where it goes, and it's like, that's not what mental illness is. It doesn't mean you're a bad person because you have an illness. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not real.
Number 4, nanotechnology. Tony Stark's tech has gotten so much better over these years. I mean, even the suitcase suit back in Iron Man 2, like my jaw dropped the first time I saw it. I was like, how is this possible? This is insane. And then come Iron Man 3, Tony's suit is absolute trash. It gets him in all this trouble. It's a prototype suit, and that's the one that he chooses to wear after threatening the Mandarin. Weird flex, but okay, sure, we'll go with it. Also, Iron Man 3 wasn't a bad movie at all. It was fine. Doesn't make sense in the timeline really, but it's fine, it's fine. But come Infinity War, all Tony needs to suit up now is his arc reactor. It just houses nanotechs that form around his body. It's awesome. So he goes from wearing a jumpsuit to being fully protected in a split second. How neat. But a shot in Infinity War could mean that his jacket is made of nanotech as well. Either that or it's a continuity mistake. Either that or it's a filming error. Tony's jacket goes from resting comfortably over his shoulders to, well, who knows? Maybe Happy took it in that weird deleted scene where he rolls up in a golf cart. I'm glad they didn't keep that one, that was weird. Number 4, Adam Warlock. In one of the many after credit scenes in Guardians of the Galaxy 2, we get a hint at Adam Warlock being introduced into the MCU. He's a perfect sovereign created by Aisha to likely be used against the Guardians of the Galaxy in their next adventure. Now in the comics, Adam was created by the Enclave, a group of scientists who just wanted to create the perfect being. Makes sense why Zac Efron was rumored to play that part, okay? He's even referred to as just that in the short after credit clip. More powerful, more beautiful, and more than capable of destroying the Guardians of the Galaxy. Now in Thor the Dark World, Eric Selvig wrote the Vault on a chalkboard among his notes on the Convergence. And in the comics, the Vault was a tear in space that was sealed by Adam Warlock. So the after credit scene in Thor the Dark World also gave us a much closer look at Adam initially. So in the after credit scene, Thor and Lady Sif visit the Collector to hand over the Reality Stone. And then in a glass case, we see a cocoon that looks just like Adam Warlock's cocoon. Guardians of the Galaxy director James Gunn admitted years later that he made a mistake putting that in, because at the time, he just wanted to put fun stuff in the collector's museum. He didn't know how serious people were gonna take the Easter eggs. Oh, buddy, you have no idea. Number 2, Pym particles. The Time Heist is a treat for MCU fans. We get to revisit fun moments in past films, even movies that fans didn't like that much, like Thor: The Dark World. We still got to go back and have some fun with that as well. Tony sees his dad and he has a heart-to-heart. Cap fights Cap and says, "Hail Hydra." It's awesome. The fans went nuts. It was a great time. Each member is given a Pym particle for said heist. They make it known that this is a factor, that they're low on Pym particles. The reason Cap and Tony have to go back even further during the heist is to get more particles. Yet before they do so, in the Avengers Tower, Scott is shrunken down. Right when Hydra comes in to take the staff, he's already small. That's when he talks about Cap's butt. They make it clear that Scott accidentally used one of these trips in the lab prior to the heist. So when Steve and Tony go back, Steve grabs extras, which explains the final battle. But how is Ant-Man able to shrink at the start of the New York heist when they were so low on Pym particles? Number 1, more Pym particles. And we're back to more Pym particles because a lot of these things don't make sense sometimes. In the first Ant-Man film, we hear numerous times the science behind the Pym particles. Because if you're gonna watch these amazing fight scenes, you have to at least understand the science behind them. So it's told to audiences twice that Pym particles shrink the space between atoms and not the atoms themselves. The weight doesn't change. So when Ant-Man is standing on Tony's shoulder complimenting Steve on his American glutes, he's probably the same weight. One of the most confusing Pym particle problems that we faced was actually in the first Ant-Man film, when it's revealed that Hank Pym's keyring is actually a functional tank. Old Tank Pym. So either Michael Douglas is just jacked and he's got these super strong hips, or the Pym particles and the weight, they just change it when they need to for the plot. Because these movies are far-fetched and it's fine, and we'll forgive these mistakes because most of the time these movies are just a load of fun.